Yes, it's gone live now.
Good evening and welcome to tonight's council meeting on the 10th of February 2021. Prayers will be taken by the Reverend Canon Lisa Barnett of St Mary's, Horsham.
A verse from the Bible from 1 Thessalonians. We always thank God for all of you, mentioning you in our prayers. We continually remember before our God and Father your work produced by faith, your labour prompted by love, and your endurance inspired by hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. So we pray. Faithful God, we give you thanks for all the responses of generosity, bravery, and tenacity in this time of pandemic. We give you thanks for all who are striving to keep our communities safe and running smoothly amidst the pressures of this time. We give you thanks for the work of this council and pray that you might continue to give these councillors wisdom, energy, and courage in the work they do for the common good. Bless this meeting, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. Please make sure that your mobile phones and other devices are switched to silent. This meeting is being recorded and is available on YouTube. Please raise your hand when you want to speak and remember to turn on your microphone, mute yourself when you finish speaking. And gentlemen, as we're in centrally heated houses and a virtual meeting, if you wish to remove your jackets, please feel free. Apologies for absence. I've got one, Councillor Newman. Are there any others?
I've received no apologies.
Thank you. On pages 5 to 6, the minutes of the 9th of December. I move that the minutes of the meeting of the council held on the 9th of December, pages 5 to 14, and of the extraordinary meeting held on December the 9th, pages 15 to 16, be approved as correct records. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Skipp. Do you wish to comment on the accuracy of the minutes? Are you all agreed that I may sign the minutes as a correct record?
Agreed.
Thank you.
Yes.
To receive any declarations of interest from members. Are there any interests being declared? Announcements. Chairman's announcements. I have none. Leader's announcements. Leader, do you have any?
No, Chairman.
Thank you. Cabinet members' announcement. Yes, everybody wishes to speak on this. And I'll take Councillor Tricia Utan first, please.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I thought that it would be good to give a key point update for environmental health and licensing. In response to government concerns over social distancing and public behaviour, environmental health and licensing are currently undertaking a joint project with their colleagues in the community wardens and economic development teams. They are contacting and visiting food takeaways and retailers open for takeaway or click and collect, giving advice to business operators on COVID-19 compliant operation and the management of customers. To further enhance this project and meet the Council's obligation under the coronavirus regulations, Environmental Health are leading on recruiting temporary COVID-19 information officers from funding which has been granted. The officers are intended to be a deployable resource for use across council services, for example, parks, town centre management, and the wardens, etc. These roles are complementary to and further enhance the work already being done by the teams in supporting businesses and residents of the district. The response to date has been very positive and well received by businesses. In general, we are seeing high levels of compliance across the district. With regards to public behaviour, in the vast majority of scenarios, shops and public spaces are calm, quiet and well ordered, with little or no obvious sign of compliance issues either for us or the police. That said, we are not resting on our laurels and will enhance our presence throughout the district over the coming weeks. I'd also like to take this opportunity of giving our most sincere thanks to Greg Charman, Nick Jenkins, and his team, including Kay Whiteley, Liz Burt, Tony Sculding, and Daniel Wurzel, for their organisation and the superb rollout of COVID vaccination at Christ's Hospital, and to also give formal thanks to all the volunteers who gave their time to help. It has been the most tremendous success and contributed in no small way to the overall ability of the UK vaccination programme in succeeding and in achieving the amazing rates so far. So congratulations to both our officers and our volunteers, who obviously are too many to mention. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Clevickers.
Thank you, Chairman. Just following on from what Councillor Utan has just said, I'd like to endorse everything she said about the vaccination programme at Christ Hospital. But I would also particularly like to thank Councillor David Skip and his wife, who have both been working very hard there, giving out those vaccinations. And I would just like to endorse my thanks to everybody involved in that rollout, but particularly to Councillor Skip. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Jonathan Chowan.
Thank you, Chairman. Our leisure centres are sadly closed at the moment, but will reopen in a COVID-secure manner as soon as the restrictions lift. I'm acutely aware of the real health and well-being benefits that our leisure centres provide to the community. They are an incredibly important resource. The team are working closely with Places Leisure to ensure that all costs are closely monitored and kept to the absolute minimum. A second deed of variation is being issued at the moment to cover the change in the law for the second lockdown, and we are anticipating a further deed of variation for the current closure period as well. As you will see from the update to the budget, I am very pleased to reassure my colleagues that we are operating well within the previously agreed maximum support package for this financial year. I am also hopeful that our bid for a leisure recovery fund is successful. We should find out at the end of this month. Rookwood, I would like to thank everyone who has provided feedback to our proposals for Rookwood. I'm delighted to let members know that we are launching a website and a printed guide. These will answer the misconceptions and present our exciting vision for a new country park, extension to Warren Nature Reserve, and a highly sustainable, eco-friendly development with 250 much needed affordable homes. On Wilder Horsham District, I'm pleased to inform all members that despite the latest lockdown, Wilder Horsham District is progressing well. The landowner advisor has been working with a variety of community groups as well as landowners, and we have exciting projects starting in Henfield and Bramber. 3 applications have already been granted for the Nature Recovery Award. This is a grant fund that gives funds to groups and landowners to kickstart their wildlife enhancing projects. This award is particularly suitable for parish councils, so I would urge members to inform their parish councils about this so they can do their own projects as well. The mapping to identify the nature recovery network across the district has started. Discussions have commenced with the Parks and Countryside team on how HDC-owned land can contribute to the development of the network. A communications plan has been developed. There will be regular articles in Parish Magazine. The project now has its own webpage and a presence on social media and a Facebook page, Twitter and Instagram accounts. So please do keep your eyes out for updates. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Philip Circus.
Thank you very much, Chairman. As members will know, we set a very ambitious target for carbon reduction for the council and for the district. And to help me do that, I'm in the process of setting up an advisory group. This is not a committee of the council, so we're not in the area of getting a composition that reflects the political makeup of the council. This is an advisory body to me as the cabinet member, and it will have 2 functions. First of all, it will bring into our deliberations moving forward expertise, particularly where we feel we don't necessarily have that expertise in-house. And secondly, because if we're going to achieve our ambition for the district, we need stakeholders. We need people to work with throughout the district who have a real contribution to make to achieving our targets for the district, as well as, of course, for the council as such. So this is a group, a committee. I'm not sure we've yet settled on a title, certainly on a snappy title, but we are in the process of working out both the title and the composition. And I shall be pursuing that tomorrow with officers. We've got some idea of who we want to invite to make ourselves as representative as possible, but we are moving towards getting the composition of this group settled, and then I will be able to announce who the members are and more precisely what their terms of reference will be. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Paul Clark.
Thank you, Chairman. The pandemic continues to bring much hard work to the team handling grants and payments, and I would like to thank the team both here and in Northamptonshire over all its hard work. We've disbursed so far by the 9th of February in the latest tranche of grants 6.55 million in all categories. We received 2,740 requests so far, of which we've granted 2,075, i.e. 75.8% of the total. 156 or 5.7% are under consideration, and 508 or 18.5% refused so far. The grant system is complicated, with grants available to cover the period of the second lockdown, or tier 2, or tier 4, or finally lockdown number 3. Grants are available for businesses that pay business rates or none, and also there are discretionary rates as well, discretionary grants, sorry, as well. As you can hear, the whole thing is intensely complicated, and the team are working very hard to be fair and accurate, and I thought I would share this with Council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Raydor.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. There was mention at the beginning of the Cabinet member announcements of Christ Hospital. I think it's probably appropriate to mention the Glebe surgery in Storrington. At the beginning of the vaccination campaign, they were vaccinating people, I think, as from Henfield, Stenning, and I also believe some from Billingshurst. I think the job they did was superb. I just thought it was worth mentioning those to councillors. Thank you.
Thank you. Chief Executive's announcements. Does the Chief Executive have any?
None from me, Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5, questions from the public. We've received one question from a member of the public. Mr. Paul Cornicky, you have 2 minutes in which to ask your question.
He's just been submitted to the meeting, but I can see there's no microphone next to his name. Paul, I don't know if you can hear me, Mr. Cornicky. Right, but you don't seem to have a microphone for some reason. Sorry, there seems to be a technical problem for him. He's left the meeting again, and I suspect he's going to try and come back in again. If you can just bear with it for a second.
Okay.
It's not me you're after, is it?
Paul, Mr. Kaniki, are you there?
I am, yes. Absolutely.
Oh, fine. Oh, lovely. Sorry. I thought your microphone wasn't working. Sorry,
No.
the chairman just said that you had 2 minutes in which you could.
Apologies, yeah. Right. Well, good evening, everyone, and thank you for letting me pose this question. My question relates to agenda item 6B, budget and MTFS. I note and agree with the proposal to increase council tax by a flat £5 for the year 2021-22. However, I observe that table 2 in the report does not confirm what assumptions have been made regarding council tax increases in the 3 years afterwards. Understanding the reasonableness of assumptions made in putting together these projections is very important to instill public confidence in their integrity. It is surprising that there is no mention of the council tax increase assumed for these 3 years, especially as every such equivalent report presented to council for the previous 5 years, and maybe more, did. So please confirm the level of council tax increase assumed for each of these 3 years, i.e. 2022-23, 2023-24 and 2024-25. For the avoidance of doubt, my question refers to the increase in council tax paid by residents, i.e. to the Band D charge proposed as £157.52 for 2021-22, and not the percentage change in the overall council tax receipt, which is of course affected by other factors. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Clark, would you like to answer, please?
Yes, Chairman, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Kornicki, for your question. As you've noted, the key assumptions behind the budget are in Table 2 on page 16 of the Cabinet Papers of the 28th of January meeting. Council tax increases are a councillor decision made for 1 year only, and in this case, 2021 to 2022. Councillors do not preempt council tax rise decisions in future years because this would restrict the decision-making of the future council. Therefore, there are no figures included in the medium-term financial strategy for council tax rises in 2022-23, 23-24, or 24-25. The only increase in the numbers reflects the increase in the tax base and the increase in people who are not paying council tax. Thank you.
Do you have a supplementary question, Mr. Kornicki?
Yes, please, may I? Yep.
Okay.
So if I've understood properly, at a time when council finances are under pressure, you've advised us that this year's MTFS assumes a 3-year council tax freeze. This starkly contrasts with the 2% increase that was projected in last year's MTFS projections. As I suspected that was the case, I quickly calculated the extra council tax that HDC could raise by following the lead of neighbouring councils, e.g., for example, Mid Sussex and Chichester, in projecting next year's increase forward to those 3 years. For Horsham, this totals an extra receipt of council tax of almost £2 million. So my follow-up question is, why have you made such an implausible assumption in your projections, which has inflated the published medium-term deficit by 40%, that's 40%, unless perhaps to attempt to justify the potential sale or closure of valued community facilities? Thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Kornicki. I am not aware of the numbers that you are talking about, so I will take them as an advisement and come back to you with a written reply. Thank you.
Thank you. Agenda item 6A on pages 17 to 20, recommendations from Cabinet on the 28th of January. 21-22 Council Tax Reduction Scheme. I invite the Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets to present this item and move the recommendations.
Thank you, Chairman. Agenda item 6A. The current Horsham Council Tax Reduction Scheme provides financial support for those on low incomes. The current scheme reduces the amount of council tax paid by working-aged customers in financial difficulties. Our scheme is one of the most generous in the country. Given the challenges caused by the pandemic, Cabinet proposed that the scheme remain unchanged for the financial year 2021-2022. It is therefore recommended to Council to agree the inclusion of a no-charge CTR scheme for 2021-2022. As these schemes are annual schemes, they therefore require an annual review and approval even when no changes to the scheme are being proposed. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this motion?
Yes, I will second it, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Daw. Do you wish to speak now or later in the debate?
Later, please.
Okay, thank you. If anyone is minded not to vote in favour of the motion, please indicate this by raising your hand. No one has indicated they intend to vote against the motion or to abstain. The motion is therefore carried. Item 6B, the 2021-22 Budget and Medium-Term Financial Strategy to 2024/25. The item on the budget and the setting of the council tax is in two parts. The recommendations of the Cabinet in respect of the budget for 2021-22 are set out on pages 17 and 18 of the agenda, together with an addendum on page 19. The council tax resolution and statutory calculations, which have been approved by the council, are set out in pages 21 to 27. Please note the legislation requires the council to take a recorded vote in respect of any decision relating to the budget and setting of the council tax, including any amendments to the procedure, to the recommendations. I invite Councillor Paul Clark, Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets, to introduce the budget, make his budget presentation, and move the recommendations of the Cabinet numbered 1 to 10 on page 18 of the agenda. Councillor Clark, you have a minimum of 10 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. The details of the proposed 2021-2022 revenue and capital budgets and revised MTFS following the government's draft financial settlements were reported to Cabinet. I do not propose to go through the details again, as they are all in the backing documents to this meeting agenda. We are able to set an essentially balanced budget for 2021-2022, despite all the problems and uncertainties caused by the pandemic, thanks to unexpected generous government funding and prompt actions taken by this council. The report confirms the retention of a £7 million capital programme and a £5 increase in council tax. Despite the £5 council tax increase, our council tax level remains the lowest in West Sussex for any district or borough. Since the 2021-2022 budget papers were compiled for the Cabinet meeting on the 28th of January, a change has been made affecting the funding, which has led to a small increase to the projected deficit for 2021-2022 and in the NTFS, but it is small. The 2022-2025 MTFS is based on the latest outlook, but the degree of uncertainty remains very high at this time. The report outlines more long-term indicative and potential capital commitment and also sets out a series of prudential indicators. These are statutory requirements to demonstrate that the Council's capital programme is affordable and prudent in the context of the Council's overall finances. This, together with a statement on the robustness of reserves. We will nonetheless be faced by a number of unpalatable decisions later, possibly. I therefore recommend to Council the budget and the MTFS as per the agenda, paragraph 6B, subpoints 1 to 10. I would particularly draw your attention to paragraph 1, reflecting the £5 increase on the council tax and other increases under subparagraph 9 in Appendix I. And I recommend it to Council. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Clark. Do you have a seconder for this?
I will second it, please, Madam Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Daw. Do you wish to speak now or later in the debate?
Later, please.
I invite Councillor Francis Haigh, leader of the minority group, to speak. Councillor Haigh, you have a maximum of 10 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. This year has been a most extraordinary year and one of the most difficult and challenging that many of us will have experienced. Some people have sadly died, others are suffering from long COVID-19 or from isolation, and many have been separated from their families and loved ones for almost a year. Others have lost their jobs or are struggling with reduced hours, while those on the front line in the NHS and other services have been working all hours to keep us all safe, to care for us, to distribute supplies, and more recently, to deliver the amazing vaccination programme. Locally, there have been many across our community who have worked to ensure that their friends and neighbours have access to food and medicines. There have been some fantastic efforts from the community to support others, and we pay tribute to all those who have given their time and energy to support their community. In this situation, it would be wrong to make political points. What this year does remind us is that a council's role is to take responsibility for those matters where collective action is necessary, if not essential. The council acts for all of us in the community to deliver the services that we need, that are legal obligations, or in some cases are optional extras, and taxation enables the council to fulfil this role. For example, throughout the pandemic, as you've heard from some of the Cabinet earlier, our public health team have worked with businesses to ensure they're following the COVID-19 guidance so that they can operate in a COVID-safe environment. Our hard-working waste teams have maintained bin collections and cleared all of the additional waste in our towns and green spaces as more people have spent time locally. Our housing teams have helped to house the homeless so that all of our community has a safe place to stay. The council has been hit hard by the pandemic. Income has been lost in various sectors such as car parking, leisure services and commercial property. Costs have risen due to additional workloads and demands for services. The council has trimmed its costs as best it can, including making redundancies. We deplore the loss of jobs at this difficult time, but we thank those people who have sadly lost their jobs for their service to this council, and we wish them well for their future. We commend the Cabinet for grasping the nettle with an increase in council tax for 2021-2022. It is a necessary step to ensure that this council can continue to deliver the services for the community, and we strongly support the council tax reduction scheme that has just been approved. However, we think that the assumptions in the medium-term financial strategy are unduly pessimistic. As the vaccination programme progresses, some things will return to normal, some may change, and some will never be the same again. The winds of change are already showing in the high streets as businesses move online. However, what is likely is that the need to socialise will come back more strongly than before. People will want to be together. They'll need community meeting places as much as they need coffee bars and pubs. They need to exercise and to be out and about in our green spaces, which are so valuable for our mental well-being. One of the things that's always struck me about Horsham is that so many of our organisations were created after the Second World War. They were a reaction to the long hardships that had been endured. Recovering from COVID-19 will be somewhat similar, and as a council, we should be prepared to support our communities to the best of our capabilities. In addressing the tough financial decisions this coming year about our finances and assets, we should always remember that we're here to act for our communities, to look after the assets that we hold on their behalf, and to consider people before profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Haigh. I now open the debate to all members. This will be an opportunity for members to move any amendments. Nobody seems to want to speak. Councillor Jupp. I've just seen your hand.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I would like to congratulate the Cabinet and the officers for providing a balanced budget. Not easy in these times. And also, I think it is worth mentioning the level of reserves. Sorry? The level of reserves that our Cabinet member described as robust, which is really quite a modest description of it. As far as I can work out, our reserves anticipated to be at the end of March represent something like a third of our annual expenditures. That is an extremely good figure, and fortunate for us as we move ahead into such difficult financial times. If I could then move on to the question of capital expenditures. Now, these are listed on 2 appendices, and if I'm allowed, I would just like to refer to Appendix D and Appendix J. First off, on Appendix D, on behalf of my fellow members for Billingshurst, I'm pleased to see that the Billingshurst car park improvements will be taking place during 21-22. Congratulations are needed to be made there. It's been a long gestation period, but I do know that there were some complicated land ownership issues that have had to be overcome, which I hope that is now the case. Could I ask either the Cabinet Member or the Director for Resources whether or not we should read Appendix D and the other appendix in conjunction with regard to future capital expenditure, Appendix J that is, over the next 3 or 4 years, because the totals given are completely different. I would like to come back after the answer, please.
I'm not quite sure on the protocol on this. Perhaps I can have some advice from the monitoring officer, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Jupp is entitled to ask the question. If we're able to give an answer this evening, that would be great. But if not, we can come back and the Constitution allows us to reply in writing. So I don't know who the question was asked from or asked of, and whether an answer can be given this evening, but certainly the Constitution allows us to reply in writing, Chairman.
Councillor Jubb, are you prepared to accept that? Because it's sort of put somebody on the spot somewhat with your question.
Well, forgive me, Chairman, these are figures that have been produced by the Cabinet Member and Director of Resources, and I'm just asking whether or not the 2 totals for each of the years are exclusive and therefore should be added together if we are looking at expenditure levels over the next 4 years. I thought it was quite a straightforward question. Perhaps the Director may be able to help us.
Indeed, perhaps she might. Would the Director
Happy
like to
for me to speak, Chairman, then yes, I can.
I am happy for you to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, they're 2 different documents in some ways. Appendix D is the capital programme with the putting forward proposals of what we are actually going to do. Appendix J is an indication to councillors of the type of capital spend that we will have over the next 10 years. It's not fully costed, it's not fully detailed, and the spend will not necessarily be in those years. So the projects in Appendix D are projects that colleagues have costed. They expect them to run in those years. As Councillor Jupp knows from our previous conversations, particularly overview and scrutiny, our capital projects never run exactly to the pound in the year that colleagues set them out. Appendix J is much more vague than that. But I wanted councillors to understand this year that when we're talking about reserves, and I knew councillors would want to talk about reserves, we do have ongoing commitments to our properties and our important services in a capital of a capital nature. So we know we will have to make some changes perhaps to the Parkside offices when we come back. We know that at some point we will need to consider probably around 2025 when there's a break in our current lease, whether we remain in Parkside or go somewhere else. We know that the pavilions, the leisure centre and the Billingshurst leisure centres the pavilions, Stenning and Billingshurst are all getting a little bit old now and are going to need some work. We know that we will need to upgrade our vehicle fleet. And given our commitment to striving towards carbon neutrality, that is possible, but that will cost us more. In fact, it's highly likely it will cost us more unless the price comes down of those sort of vehicles in the next 10 years. So what we wanted to show to councillors is the capital programme isn't a really short-term programme, which is Appendix D, which is what you've always seen in the past, but there are longer-term projects that we need to think about, particularly if we're looking at our overall funding envelope. So we couldn't say,
oh yes, that's fine, we've got say £14 million in reserves and we can live on them for 2 or 3 years without doing anything else because we'll be fine. Because at some point towards the end of that period or during that period, some of those assets that are in difficulties or likely to be in difficulties or need upgrading or we need some change will need work. So I wanted councillors to have a feel for that work, which is why we put Appendix J in. But apologies if it has confused some councillors. I know it has. It's not an appendix we've shown in previous years, but we thought it would be helpful for people to understand the type of commitments we have just by being a council. I hope that helps.
Thank you. May I ask a supplementary question, Chairman?
If it's related to the same process, yes.
It is.
Okay.
I wonder whether or not the director could confirm that the figures in Appendix D, some of those expenditures might be funded not necessarily from from district council, sorry, resources, but from government grants or S106 or SIL. Is that correct?
It is correct, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Milne.
Thank you, Chair. I think we can all appreciate these are very tough times, but there's a danger we could overreact and take decisions today based on information that's going to radically change tomorrow. I'm referring specifically to the pressure created by this budget to sell off much loved community assets such as the Drill Hall, Rookwood and the Broadbridge Heath running track. The medium-term projections show our budget deficit widening every year down to 2025. But this is based on a number of assumptions which are not listed in the report, which can only be at this point simply guesswork. For example, the figures assume that major
Councillor Milne, can I interrupt you a minute? You are actually saying these are assumptions. They are assumptions. They're not based on fact. This is a budget that's being discussed and is going to change if situations change. So I don't think we need to refer to individual items on this.
I'm not sure what you're trying to say. I know it's an assumption, but they're not undeclared assumptions. They're unspecified. I'm about to go through some of them, but.
Well, I don't really think you need to name each of these assumptions. That's not the point of this budget.
Well, there's a forecast deficit which builds, as I said, to 2.6 by the end of the period, but that a lot of that deficit would disappear if you understand the assumptions.
Thank you, Councillor Milne. I think we all do. Councillor Peter Burgess.
Thank you. I'm puzzled. Appendix D, Appendix so-and-so, where are they? I've got the agenda in front of me, a written copy, and I can't find them. So Councillor Jupp is making, I think, good points, but I've no idea what he's talking about. Could somebody enlighten me, please?
Can anybody do that?
Yeah, I can explain. I think the appendixes which are being referred to are part of the Cabinet report, which went to Cabinet last month, at the end of last month. And the recommendations from that Cabinet report are coming here. So they're not included in the council agenda, they're in the Cabinet agenda, which is referred to in the agenda for this meeting.
Madam Chairman, if I can come back, if we're going to talk about this, and I suspected that was the answer, then I think we need the papers in front of us. If I'd have known, I'd have gone and got the agenda, but we must have the papers in front of us that people are referring to. And I'm afraid right now we haven't. For instance, I did raise a question at Cabinet on the future long-term spending, which involved spending £10 million on the capital in about 5 years' time. And I was told, oh, it's just a thing, it's okay, we don't need to talk about that. I'm sorry, but if we're discussing finance or anything, we need to have the papers in front of us so that members can go and check. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ruth Fletcher.
Thank you. I'd like to ask a question on the procedure here of the monitoring officer. We're debating this budget and the medium-term financial strategy with an opportunity to put forward amendments and vote for and against, and we're debating the content of that. So I would like to ask the monitoring officer whether she would consider it appropriate to allow Councillor Milne to continue with the points he wished to make, which were relevant to the content of the reports.
Thank you, Chairman. If you're happy for me to answer, I have just sent a note asking for the Chairman to go back to Councillor Mill just to see if there was a question that he wanted to pose, and if he had actually had anything further to add. So obviously it's at the discretion of the Chairman and our Madam Chairman. So if she wants to go back to Councillor Mill or again look at and ask other members, but the order of the questioning is again up to her. It's her discretion.
Okay, well I'll take Councillor Mill and go back to his original question if he has one.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. My question is, would it be possible to add to the report the details of the all the assumptions that have gone into the budget projections for the future? For example, a couple of major areas, revenue generators such as parking and leisure, in this current year, of course, have been very badly hit and revenues strongly down. But I believe in the forecast that then forecast not to return to normal levels even by 2025, the end of the period, which I would consider extremely pessimistic, bearing in mind the potential 10,000 increase in our population. So that you just simply wouldn't know any of that just from reading the report. So that's what I would like, a full detail of all the assumptions so we understand where those figures come from, because if you look at the deficit at the end of it, 2.6 million, you're thinking that's, panic stations. But if you understand how that figure is generated, you could realize that you could actually come up by a few simple measures with a very, very much smaller figure that would not be threatening and might not lead to the same decisions over such issues as Drillhall, Woodwood and Broadbridge Heath. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Donnelly.
Thank you, Chairman. Really in response to Councillor Milne, and I'll say what I've said previously, and I don't apologise for saying it. I think the Cabinet and the officers have done a great job in getting this coming year's budget in the sound position it is. And I think we should give some thanks to government as well, where we've got some ad hoc funding, and hopefully we do get in the future. But I think many of us appear to forget that we have a statutory responsibility to balance the budget. If we fail to do so, there is a clear and present danger that we could be put into administration, which has happened to other councils. If we go into administration, it'll be a fire sale by an administrator with the members having no say in it whatsoever of assets which are non-statutory assets. And that can include all the, as Councillor Milne says, the very much loved services that we do provide in this district. So it is a very, very serious position we're in. Everybody really knows that. I do agree with them that I think things will probably accelerate forward to a better position than what has been anticipated in some quarters. But nevertheless, the Cabinet Member for Finance and the officers have to take a prudent and cautious view of the future, because we just don't know where it's going to go. We're all hoping the vaccination will resolve the current problem, but do we really know? So as I say, we must never forget there is this real risk of being put into administration if we do not balance the budget. And there will be a fire sale of our assets by the incoming administrator who will ruthlessly balance the budget, regardless of what you and I and the rest of us think of our treasured non-statutory services. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Croker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just really to answer Councillor Peter Burgess, as the member of the public demonstrated a little bit earlier, these papers and all the appendices have been publicly available since before Cabinet. So I really don't think there's a problem there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chowan.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I'm normally a glass half full sort of guy, and but I have to say that my portfolio is pretty well nearly all discretionary, and what Councillor Donnelly has highlighted is a real concern. And I have to say the whole last 12 months of managing the portfolio has been very challenging for the whole team. And I don't want to be over pessimistic. We're looking at a long-term view of our finances, but the sort of news that I'm getting at the moment is, well, say the leisure centres, which I've already talked to you about, is the amounts are huge there. The turnaround from an income of over 600,000 to an outgoing income of 1.4 million is a real turn. That's a £2 million turnaround. And I was hoping we would be having, we'd all be back open in January and firing on all cylinders. We're still closed. And for the leisure centres to lose the January, which is where they get most of their income starting, people join up straight after Christmas when they want to fight the flab, has been lost. So that is concerning, and looking into the future as much as we can. And the announcements we've had from government about travel and tourism don't give you too much encouragement. But also I look at the Capitol Theatre. It was hugely, the success of the Capitol was based on the profits we used to generate from cinema. And looking to the future of cinema is pretty pessimistic on that, I would say, going forward. So it's really difficult at this stage. I don't think we need to frighten everybody too much, but the good news doesn't seem to be coming. The vaccine would be most welcome if it does have a change. But every time we get an uplift in confidence from the news, we follow it a few days later by a bit of a downturn. So I think for us to look into the future and just be aware, none of these decisions, Councillor Burgess mentioned a 10 million capital project for the capital. Well, I think that's highly unlikely now, considering what's going on. But that is something that we're not going to decide tonight or tomorrow or probably next year. So it is really challenging, and it's very, very difficult. But I don't wish to be over pessimistic, but I think we've got to be fairly realistic, is that we can have a view of what the future's like. But actually, I think we can only make decisions on what are in front of us practically day to day, maybe weekly, monthly. But anything more than monthly, I think we're really asking for serious challenges. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I see you want to speak again, Councillor Fletcher. As you were speaking on behalf of Councillor Milne, I will allow you to speak again.
It was a question previously. I would like to speak now, so thank you very much. As the director and others have said, the outlook is very uncertain. The MTFS has a huge degree of uncertainty, and the underlying assumptions do need to be explicit and they do need to be examined. We need to review how much we rely on our previous boasts of being the lowest council tax in the area, because that's one of the factors that's leading us into this. We need to review which areas will continue as normal and which ones we need to change. It's not just a case of selling off valuable community assets. We've invested extremely heavily recently in parking, and we spent over £8 million on the Piries Place car park, and yet we're projecting that our parking will perform massively worse than it has in the past. So we need to review whether or not going forward any budget paring needs to be done by selling off of community assets, or whether we should actually be engaging in the ongoing large programme of investment in car parks, which we're indicating in the MTFS. So I would thoroughly support a further examination of this with explicit examination of the underlying assumptions about how we're working on this.
Thank you. I'm now going to invite Councillor Ray Dorr as the seconder to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I noticed Councillor Haig's comments, which were very welcome, that she does not want to be political. I think that's probably appropriate at this particular time. I also noticed she said that some things may stay the same, some may not return to normal. I think that's probably something that is fairly evident in this particular budget. We seem to spend an awful lot of time talking about Appendix J, which is merely an indicative capital commitment going forward. And if I look at point 5 on the recommendations, it's the recommendations we're voting for. It says that the projected future budgets on the revenue account in 22-23 and 24-25 are noted, and the medium-term financial strategy continues to be reviewed and refined to ensure that decisions are taken to set balanced budgets in those years. No one is saying anything different about that. All we are saying is that we need to be aware of what might happen to us in the future, and we need to, therefore, as we unroll, hopefully, from this pandemic, and as things return to normal, and I pick up again on Councillor Haig's words, things may not return to normal, whether it's parking or anything else. I also think it's probably good to mention, as Councillor Jupp did, how wise we were to maintain a high level of reserves and not put ourselves into the difficulties that, as we know, many councils are in. I think beyond that, I would just say to members, you're voting tonight on the recommendations. You're not voting on Appendix J, on what might happen, or we might be spending money in 25-26. Those are points that we need to consider as the year unravels, as this pandemic unravels. It's hit us several times. I don't think anyone would have thought we'd be in the position we're in today had we gone back to last April. And that's, you know, less than a year, it's 9 months on. We can all be optimistic, and people can certainly say, I don't think things will be as bad as it says they will be. I don't know. We don't know. None of us know. So I would simply say to members, tonight you're being asked to simply approve the recommendations. You're not being asked to decide what happens in 23-24. You're being asked simply to agree the recommendations that are in front of you. And I commend those to everyone on the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. I invite the Cabinet member to make his final speech of reply.
Thank you. I have nothing to add to what the seconder of the motion has said, apart from proposing to the council that we adopt the motion as posed in the report. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. I now ask the council to approve recommendations 1 to 10 on pages 18 en bloc by means of a recorded vote.
I will therefore read out the names. So this is for those recommendations as just mentioned by the chairman for the budget. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Bevis.
For.
Councillor Blackwell.
For.
Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Britton.
For.
I think Councillor Brown, I think, is absent. Councillor Karen Burgess.
For.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
For.
Councillor Chowan.
For.
Councillor Circus.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cornell.
For.
Councillor Costin.
For.
Councillor Croker.
For.
Councillor Dorr.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
For.
Councillor Greening.
For.
Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Hogben.
For.
Councillor Jupp.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Lambert.
For.
Councillor Landernew.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Milne.
4.
Councillor Minto.
4.
Councillor Mitchell.
4.
Councillor Morgan.
4.
Councillor Noel.
4.
Councillor Platt.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Potts.
4.
Councillor Ritchie.
4.
Councillor Rowbottom.
4.
Councillor Saheed.
4.
Councillor Sanson.
4.
Councillor Skip.
4.
Councillor Stannard.
4.
Councillor Vanderkloot.
4.
Councillor Vickers.
4.
Councillor Walters.
4.
Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Utan.
4.
That is unanimous.
Thank you very much. By approving the recommendations, you have now approved the Council's budget for 2021-22. The Council now needs to formally to approve the overall Council tax for 21-22, including the County Council, Police and Crime Commissioner and Parish Council precepts as set out in recommendation 1 to 7 on pages 21 to 27. Is there a proposer for this resolution? Councillor Donnelly, thank you. And is there a seconder for this proposal? Councillor Landau, thank you very much. I ask the Council to approve recommendations 1 to 7 en bloc by means of a recorded vote.
Councillor Allen.
4.
Councillor Baldwin.
4.
Councillor Bevis.
4.
Councillor Blackhall.
4.
Councillor Bragnam.
4.
Councillor Britton.
4.
Councillor Karen Burgess.
4.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
4.
Councillor Chowan.
4.
Councillor Circus.
4.
Councillor Clark.
4.
Councillor Cornell.
4.
Councillor Costin.
4.
Councillor Croker.
4.
Councillor Dorr.
4.
Councillor Donnelly.
4.
Councillor Fletcher.
4.
Councillor Greening.
4.
Councillor Haig.
4.
Councillor Hogburn.
4.
Councillor Jupp. Councillor Jupp.
4. 4.
Councillor Kitchen.
4.
Councillor Lambert.
4.
Councillor Landau.
4.
Councillor Lindsay.
4.
Councillor Lloyd.
4.
Councillor Milne.
4.
Councillor Minto.
4.
Councillor Mitchell.
4.
Councillor Morgan.
4.
Councillor Noel.
4.
Councillor Platt.
4.
Councillor Potter.
4.
Councillor Potts.
4.
Councillor Ritchie.
4.
Councillor Rowbottom.
4.
Councillor Saheed.
4.
Councillor Sanson.
4.
Councillor Skip.
4.
Councillor Stannard. Councillor Stannard. Councillor Vanderkloot.
4.
Councillor Vickers.
4.
Councillor Walters.
4.
Councillor Wright.
4.
Councillor Utan.
4.
And Councillor Stannard. Well, that's unanimous of everyone that voted.
Thank you very much. By making the resolution, you have now set the council tax for the year 2021-22. Item 8A on page 31, recommendation from committees, Audit Committee, Capital Strategy 2021-22. I invite Councillor Stuart Ritchie, Chairman of the Audit Committee, to present this item and move the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The Council delegates to the Audit Committee a number of functions, one of which is to review the Treasury management and prudential indicators. But as part of that delegation, there's also a requirement to report back, and this is the mid-year report. The recommendations are relatively straightforward in the sense that you're invited to note the Treasury management stewardship report at the mid-year and to note the mid-year prudential indicators. The report was considered in detail by the Audit Committee. We particularly noted that during the period the Council complied with its legislative and regulatory requirements and also what's called the statutory borrowing limit. In that regard, I think it's important to note that the council had no external debt and was experiencing relatively high levels of investment assets, including cash balances, due to receiving grants which have been dispersed relatively quickly throughout the year to residents and businesses. There's one breach, but a relatively minor one, that was rectified promptly, associated with moving to remote working. There's a confusion over limits that could be applied, and so 5 million was lent to one local authority when the limit was 4 million. The investment was returned without any issue within, I think, within 2 months of the breach, and there has not been a similar breach since. So I therefore am very happy to, on behalf of the Audit Committee, to bring forward these recommendations and make that proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Ritchie. Is there a seconder for this motion, please?
Yes, Councillor Blackall.
Thank you, Councillor Blackall. Do you wish to speak now or later in the debate?
Later, if there's a debate, yes.
Okay, thank you. Well, I'm scanning the screen and I can't see any hands raised. If anyone is minded not to vote in favour of the motion, please indicate this by raising your hand. No, nobody's done that. Okay. No one has indicated that they intend to vote against the motion or to abstain. The motion is therefore carried. Agenda item 8B, recommendations from committees. Overview and Scrutiny Committee report of the Off-Street Task and Finish Group, Off-Street Parking Task and Finish Group. I invite Tony Bevis, Chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, to present this item and move the recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's quite a long recommendation, and I hope most councillors have got this in front of them. We had a long debate at last Overview and Scrutiny, and we had present both the Director of Place and the Head of Strategic Planning, who were able to understand what we were trying to achieve with this resolution. I think it's true to say that although there is a series of recommendations here, we recognise that this is more of a direction of travel for the council rather than a final position, because it's going to require officer time and consultant time to put together policies based on these recommendations. And as they work through those recommendations and come up with policies, it may be that things change a bit, but obviously the finalised policies will come back to council for their consideration. So the idea is that we are seeking to provide more off-street parking in the district in future, to avoid the problems we have at the moment with streets clogged up with cars being parked. And we're also trying to achieve one or two other things with looking at the way things are moving in the future in terms of charging point for electric cars, proper facilities for cycle racks to encourage people to cycle, and to try and avoid people converting their garages into additional accommodation space. So I'm pleased to move these set of recommendations.
Thank you. Is there a seconder for this motion?
Yes, I'll second.
Thank you, Councillor Donnelly. Do you wish to speak now or later in the debate?
Yes, I might as well speak now. As the Chairman of Scrutiny said, and as the members will remember, the off-street parking task and finish report number 1 was tabled at the council's meeting 9th of December 2020 and deferred. Therefore, there was a report number 2 was debated at Scrutiny on the 25th of January. And as the Chairman of Scrutiny has just said, we were most grateful for the very positive and informative presence of the Director of Place, Head of Strategic Planning, Head of Development, and the Cabinet Member for Planning. Their presence was invaluable. And I must, of course, mention as well that the Head of Strategic Planning did provide us with a live-in slide presentation, which was invaluable background information. The debate, as the chairman had said, was excellent, went on for an hour. And at the end of the meeting, agreed unanimously to take this forward to yourselves, which we're doing tonight. I think a lot of us feel that this really should have been reviewed 10, 20 years ago. It's quite clear that we've been turning our estates into giant car parks in the past decade or two. It's really, really most unfortunate. The evidence is crystal clear. There's probably about 2 cars per household, certainly according to the last census done 10 years ago. And the failure to provide adequate off-street parking, as the chairman's already said, has caused huge problems. One of the benefits of, for example, having a minimum of 2 parking spaces per household, regardless of the size of them, is that, of course, it will allow us to move forward with the green agenda of bringing in electric cars, because one of the recommendations works in very well with this off-street parking concept, which is that there must be ducts on every new off-street parking site. I mean, when I look at those lovely old terrace houses in Horsham and I see people parking a block, 2 blocks, 3 blocks away, I just wonder how after when's it 2030, when we will no longer be able to purchase fossil fuel vehicles and will have to go onto electric, how these people are going to charge their cars. I do accept technology, of course, will move forward, and already is moving forward with more effective batteries and other concepts. Believe that's the moment. I think the intent of county with their parking matrix was good, but I think it really was inadequately based on evidence. We all know that the intention was to try to encourage people to use cars less. Well, restricting off-street car parking was not really a very good way of doing that, particularly in the southeast, where car ownership goes up and through the roof. So that was certainly not sustainable, and the evidence they came forth with, I think, was really improper. So I therefore have great pleasure in supporting the chair of scrutiny in seconding the motion. And for those who wish to look at the great detail, it is actually on page 32 to page 33 of your bundle. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Ruth Fletcher.
Thank you. I do support having a review of parking for Horsham. It's very important that the level of parking we provide for is tailored to local need. Indeed, West Sussex, in their recent review of the parking matrix, has started to tailor it to the differing needs of different types of location, town centres, suburban areas and rural areas, and that's entirely appropriate. And I would support having more detailed tailoring to Horsham's own particular needs. But I don't support as that part of that the current proposal to have a blanket level of parking across Horsham for all types of locations. I think that's a regressive step. One of the reasons it's important to look at our local need is, as has been mentioned, the blight of on-street parking, which is a visual blight. It's a road safety blight. It has many downsides, and there are places across the continent which are successfully pursuing progressive targets to reduce the amount of on-street parking year on year. And I would support that. And to the extent that providing sufficient off-street parking enables us to do that, I think that's a progressive way forward. However, parking is not a fixed number that is set in stone. The amount of parking that is needed depends on the way we carry out our strategic and spatial planning. It depends on the demands we place on our developers in our local plans to propose developments that reduce the need for parking. And to a very large extent, the more parking that you provide, the more people will park there, and the more cars there will be. It doesn't matter whether they are electric cars or whether they're fossil fueled cars, they still create pollution, they still create congestion, they still create road danger, they still over-dominate our towns and our villages to the detriment of everybody's lives. And so we need to not just assume that parking is a fixed quantity. The more unnecessary parking you have, the more land is needed to be taken up for new developments. And there's an outcry at the loss of green land that is going to occur because of the huge housing pressure over the local plan period. If we oversupply parking, we will just create unnecessary extra sprawl across our beautiful countryside. So yes, I support a review, but no, I don't think that you can assume that more parking is an unalloyed good. It brings very definite harms, and we need to work to reduce the need for parking. One of the other items in the motion talks about cycle parking, and unsurprisingly, I very much support a higher priority being given to cycle parking, as is required under NPPF and government policy. In fact, it is absolutely now a part of government policy to prioritise cycle parking, and there is a new guidance that has come out from government, which government absolutely expects local councils to follow, LTN 120, which lays out very specific new parking standards, including providing parking for people who have disabilities, providing parking for people who are using bikes with trailers, people who are travelling with children, and so on. It's a much higher standard. It's much more well thought out. And frankly, I think we should simply adopt the requirement that the government is asking us to follow, rather than to try to reinvent the wheel locally on that. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Jopp.
Thank you, Chair. I will be brief. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the members of the Task and Finish group who put this report together, which was unanimously approved of by overview and scrutiny. Secondly, I wondered, and I should have asked this question at overview and scrutiny, so forgive me. I wondered whether or not the cabinet member or the officers would be able to advise as to when this particular initiative, even though it may be slightly amended as we go forward, when it will become, shall we say, part of our local plan and adopted for any developments that Horsham District Council has an interest in promoting.
Thank you, Councillor Jopp. Can somebody answer that question, please?
Chairman?
Yes, Councillor Vickers.
Yes, yes, thank you, Councillor Jupp. Obviously, we need to get a local plan in place, and then we can do an SPD when we have one in place. So hopefully that will follow on straight after our adopted local plan.
Thank you. Does that answer your question, Councillor Jopp? It does indeed. Right, if nobody else is wanting to speak, Councillor Donnelly, you've already spoken as the seconder for this motion.
I wish to respond to Councillor Fletcher.
Yes, I'll allow that.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I think that part of the problem with the highways matrix was it very clever, but like all algorithms, and we had the famous white paper one recently, they're not statistically perfect. And it just causes unnecessary hassle having a variety of different protocols for different areas. Now, part of the problem, and it's no criticism of highways. Highways, you've heard me say before, I just discovered in the last year, they have about, I don't know, is it 2,000 planning applications a year? They're not our highways department, they're highways department for the whole of West Sussex. So they do have a tremendous workload. And as a result, they do lots of desktop studies. Now, a desktop study with the best will in the world does not identify, does not provide appropriate evidence of the demand in a particular hamlet or village or town. As I've said before, when the chairman kindly put me, when the leader kindly put me onto the North Committee, which I have enjoyed, it did open my eyes to the problems in the town, where previously we said, well, the town is sustainable, so there's no need for housing whatsoever. Councillor Fletcher on several occasions, or certainly once in a planning North meeting, has talked of the parking problems being like trying to get the contents of a quart bottle into a pint bottle, and she's totally correct in that regard. The only people who have the evidence, are the ward members. I wouldn't say that I know what the parking situation is in Villiers. or Horsham town, although I have deliberately walked around a lot recently just to get a feel for it. The ward members know best. The officers don't know best. With due respect to the officers, they don't live there. They don't see it at 10 o'clock at night or 8 o'clock in the morning. The members know best. There's no debate about that. And that's why we say you have a minimum two parking spaces per new build, and you just move on from there. A reference was made by Councillor Fletcher to the dear developers. Come on, chaps, we all know the developers only have one mantra, and it's to maximize profits. They hate affordable housing. They hate parking. But you know, what's overlooked so many times is that by just putting in some car spaces off-road, you're creating a better quality of life because you're creating more space. You're not jamming people into a little box. And the best example I've always seen, having had to do some visits to new builds for various other parties, you see some lovely new builds, but you go around, you think, well, where am I going to put the Hoover? There's no built-in.
I think we're going a little off track, Councillor Donnelly.
The point I wanted to make, though, is that, thank you, Chairman, I will finish. The point I did want to make is that the developer has no scruples whatsoever, and the developer uses the county's highway matrix as a weapon to maximize his profits. That's crystal clear. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
Thank you. I think this task and a finished group have done something that we should have done, as I think Brian Donnelly has said years ago. I'm sorry to be realistic, but we need to provide the parking to cover what we need. We can talk about 2, 3, 4. I can tell you I've got 4 cars. I can tell you that Ruth Fletcher has got 2 cars. They're all parked off-piste, if I can use that word. But whatever we do, especially when we go to the confined areas, which are in Den or Trafalgar or places like that, we need to provide the parking we need. And again, I go back to this thing, this is called planning, and that's what we do. If you want to restrict cars, you must make laws to sustain the restriction. And any government or council that ever does that will lose every election. So going back, I think the Task and Finish group have done a really good, realistic job, and that we need to get that put into as best we can to make sure that that's the driving force behind any future planning we do in Horsham. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Bradnam.
Thank you, Chairman. I absolutely agree. I mean, I welcomed this and thought hallelujah when I read the report from the Task and Finish group. For far too long, people have been in denial, quite frankly, in this country, that we don't like our cars, yet we all use them. And don't forget, half of the population of Horsham district lives in the countryside. They don't have the benefit of being able to walk, cycle, catch a bus or anything else. And of course, it's to do with basic freedom as well. People want the freedom to do as they wish. This is not a dictatorship. And until there's a fully integrated transport system in this country, nothing's going to change. And so, yes, we must make provision for the car because we all use them. We all want them, and I certainly want mine. And I don't want anybody dictating to me about whether I should have a parking space or not. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bevis, as the mover of this motion, do you wish to have a final word?
I don't think it's really necessary, Chairman. I haven't heard any strong objections to it. I would reiterate that you know it is going to be up to the officers and consultants to find the evidence to make our policies watertight. But hopefully they'll be able to do that, taking into account what the Task and Finish group have provided. Thank you.
Thank you very much. If anyone is minded not to vote in favour of the motion, please indicate this by raising your hand. Councillor Bradnam, your hand's up. Is that from the last time? Thank you. If anybody is minded not to vote in favour of this motion, please indicate by raising your hand. Councillor Fletcher, you've decided you're not going to vote in favour of this. Okay, so we'll now do a roll call on the motion.
Right, okay, so this is a roll call on the motion as set out in the council agenda, the 10 recommendations for the off-street parking. Councillor Allen.
For.
Councillor Baldwin.
For.
Councillor Bevis.
For.
Councillor Blackhall. Councillor Blackhall. Councillor Bradnam.
For.
Councillor Britton.
For.
Councillor Burgess, Karen Burgess.
For.
Councillor Peter Burgess.
For.
Councillor Chowan.
For.
Councillor Circus.
For.
Councillor Clark.
For.
Councillor Cornell.
For.
Councillor Costin. For. Councillor Croker.
For.
Councillor Daw.
For.
Councillor Donnelly.
For.
Councillor Fletcher.
Abstain.
Councillor Greening. Councillor Greening. Councillor Haig.
For.
Councillor Hogben.
For.
Councillor Jupp.
For.
Councillor Kitchen.
For.
Councillor Lambert.
For.
Councillor Landieu.
For.
Councillor Lindsay.
For.
Councillor Lloyd.
For.
Councillor Milne.
For.
Councillor Minto.
For.
Councillor Mitchell.
For.
Councillor Morgan.
For.
Councillor Noel.
For.
Councillor Platt.
For.
Councillor Potter.
For.
Councillor Potts.
For.
Councillor Ritchie.
For.
Councillor Rowbottom.
For.
Councillor Saheed.
For.
Councillor Sanson.
For.
Councillor Skip.
For.
Councillor Stannard.
For.
Councillor Vandercloot.
For.
Councillor Vickers.
For.
Councillor Waters.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Councillor Utan.
For.
So that's 42 in favour and 1 abstention, so that the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Indeed, moving on to agenda item 9, reports of representatives from outside bodies. Does any member who represents the council on an outside body wish to make a report? No. Okay. Item 10 on pages 35 to 38, calendar of meetings 2021-22. I invite Glenn Chipp, the Chief Executive, to present this item.
Thank you, Chairman. Members will be grateful, I'm sure, that I'm going to be very brief on this. We've prepared the calendar on the basis of the if it ain't broke, don't fix it principle. So we followed the previous cycle. We're still continuing with licensing and governance meeting as and when required. And the details of the dates are set out in the appendices. I don't think I need to say any more than that unless any member has a question about a particular meeting.
Thank you, Chief Executive. I move that the recommendation on page 35 be approved. Are you all agreed that the recommendation on page 35 of the agenda should be approved?
Agreed.
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 Item 11, to note changes to memberships of ordinary committees of the council. These changes are for noting as in-year changes of membership to the committee should be reported to council as required by Article 8 of the Constitution. Would anybody wish to comment? No. Item 12, we have received a question on notice from Councillor Mike Croker. Councillor Croker, you have 2 minutes in which to ask Councillor Paul Clark, Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets, your question.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've had some discussions with Councillor Clark and I no longer need to ask the question of him. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to item 12A, which is urgent business. There is none, so I now declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Good night.
Good night.